Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we start today's story, I think it would be interesting if you could tell me in the comments which city in the world you're watching this video from. Leave your comments so we can see how far this story has reached. Click the like button and subscribe. All of this because Jake Olson squinted against the late afternoon sun as he maneuvered his weathered Subaru into the parking lot of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Beside him, Mia Tran fiddled with the radio, settling on a classic rock station. Finally, Jake sighed, stretching as he stepped out of the car. I thought we'd never get here. Mia hopped out, inhaling deeply. Smell that fresh air, Jake. This is going to be amazing. They unloaded their gear efficiently, shouldering heavy backpacks. As they approached the trailhead, a park ranger intercepted them. Afternoon, folks, he greeted, eyeing their equipment. Heading out for some backcountry camping? Jake nodded. Yes, sir. We've got our permit for Site 17. The ranger's expression turned serious. All right, then I need to give you a quick bear safety briefing. We've had increased activity this season. Mia listened intently as the ranger detailed proper food storage and what to do if they encountered a bear. Jake, however, fidgeted impatiently. Remember, the ranger emphasized, no food in tents. Use the bear boxes or hang your food properly. Bears have an incredible sense of smell. Got it, Jake said, eager to start hiking. We'll be careful. As they set off down the trail, Mia nudged Jake. You were barely listening. This is important stuff. Jake rolled his eyes. Relax, Mia. I've been camping before. It'll be fine. The forest enveloped them, sunlight filtering through the canopy. They hiked for hours, the weight of their packs causing sweat to bead on their foreheads. Conversation dwindled as they focused on navigating the increasingly rugged terrain. Just as dusk began to settle, they reached their designated campsite, a small clearing surrounded by towering pines and thick undergrowth. Perfect timing, Mia said, dropping her pack with a groan. Let's get set up before it's completely dark. They worked in tandem, pitching their individual tents and gathering firewood. Jake struggled with the bear hang, cursing under his breath as he attempted to toss the rope over a suitable branch. Want some help? Mia offered, returning from filling their water bottles at a nearby stream. I've got it, Jake snapped, finally succeeding on his fifth try. As night fell, they sat around a small campfire, cooking freeze-dried meals and recounting stories from their college days. The forest came alive with nocturnal sounds, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. This is nice, Mia said softly, gazing into the flames. I'm glad we finally did this trip. Jake nodded, his earlier irritation fading. Yeah, it's pretty great out here. So different from the city. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond their campfire's glow. Both friends tensed, exchanging nervous glances. Probably just a raccoon, Jake said, trying to sound confident. Mia wasn't convinced. Maybe we should turn in for the night. Pack up the food properly. They doused the fire and began securing their supplies. Jake watched as Mia meticulously packed their food into a bare canister, storing it far from their tents. Isn't that a bit much? He asked. We could just hang it in a tree. Mia shook her head. The ranger said canisters are safer. Better safe than sorry, right? Jake shrugged, heading towards his tent. If you say so. Night, Mia. Good night, Jake. Sleep tight. Don't let the bears bite. Mia joked, instantly regretting her words as a chill ran down her spine. Inside his tent, Jake rummaged through his pack, pulling out a bag of trail mix and some beef jerky. His stomach growled. The freeze-dried dinner hadn't been particularly satisfying. He hesitated, Mia's voice echoing in his head. But surely a little snack wouldn't hurt. He'd pack it away before morning. As Jake drifted off to sleep, the wrapped jerky and trail mix lay forgotten beside his sleeping bag. Outside, a gentle breeze carried the scent of food into the wilderness. where hungry predators roamed under the cover of darkness. Jake woke to a growling stomach. Moonlight filtered through the tent fabric as he fumbled for his watch. 2:17 a.m. He reached for the trail mix, munching quietly. A twig snapped outside. Jake froze, listening intently. Nothing. Probably just his imagination. He zipped the bag and tossed it aside, planning to deal with it in the morning. As Jake drifted off, a black bear emerged from the forest, nose twitching at the scent of food. Mia stirred in her tent, uneasy. A heavy shuffling sound drew closer. Her eyes snapped open as realization hit. "Jake," she hissed. No response. The bear's snuffling grew louder. Mia's heart raced. She unzipped her tent slowly, cheeking out. In the dim light, she saw the massive shape investigating Jake's tent. "Jake, wake up," Mia whispered urgently. "There's a bear." Jake groaned, half asleep. "What?" The bear's claws raked across the tent fabric. Jake's eyes widened in terror as he saw the dark silhouette looming over him. "Oh God," he breathed. The tent collapsed as the bear lunged forward. Jake's scream pierced the night. Mia watched in horror as the tent thrashed violently. "Jake," she cried, fumbling for the bear spray. The bear's powerful swipe sent Jake tumbling. Blood stained his shredded sleeping bag. He scrambled backwards, pain searing through his leg. Mia's hands shook as she aimed the spray. "Pain, get away from him." The bear turned, growling menacingly. Mia's finger tightened on the trigger, but nothing happened. The safety was still on. Jake crawled towards the trees, leaving a trail of blood. The bear's attention snapped back to him. Charged, Mia finally released the spray, creating a stinging cloud. The bear hesitated, shaking its massive head. "Run, Jake!" Mia screamed, knowing it was futile. Jake's mangled leg dragged uselessly behind him. The bear retreated momentarily, confused by the spray, but the scent of blood and fear was overpowering. It circled, preparing for another attack. Mia grabbed a flashlight, waving it frantically. "Help! Somebody help us!" But deep in the backcountry, no one could hear their desperate cries. Jake's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding. The rustling outside grew louder. He reached for his phone, its dim light revealing the forgotten snacks. "Set," he muttered, realizing his mistake. The tent fabric ripped as massive claws tore through. Jake's scream pierced the night, jolting Mia awake. "Jake?" she called, unzipping her tent. The bear's massive form filled the entrance of Jake's shredded tent. Jake scrambled backwards, pain searing through his leg as the bear's claws caught flesh. Mia emerged, horrified. "Oh God, Jake!" The bear swung again, catching Jake's shoulder. Blood sprayed as he cried out in agony. Mia frantically searched for a weapon. "Pain, get away from him!" she yelled, hurling a water bottle at the bear. The projectile bounced harmlessly off its stick fur. The bear turned, growling menacingly at Mia. Jake seized the moment, dragging himself towards the trees. Blood trailed behind him. "Run, Mia!" he gasped. Mia backed away slowly, eyes locked on the advancing bear. She fumbled for the bear spray, hands shaking. The bear charged. Mia stumbled, falling backwards. The spray canister skittered away. Jake watched helplessly as the bear loomed over Mia. "No!" he screamed. Mia rolled, narrowly avoiding razor-sharp claws. She scrambled to her feet, sprinting towards Jake. The bear pursued, its hot breath on her heels. Mia reached Jake, hauling him up. They stumbled together, the bear mere feet behind. "We can't outrun it," Jake panted, blood loss weakening him. Mia spotted a sturdy-looking tree. "We have to climb." They reached the tree, Mia boosting Jake onto a low branch. She scrambled up after him, the bear's jaws snapping inches from her foot. Safe for the moment, they clung to the trunk, gasping. The bear circled below, occasionally standing to swipe at them. "I'm so sorry," Jake wheezed. "This is all my fault." Mia tore strips from her shirt, binding Jake's wounds. "Stay with me, Jake. Help will come." As dawn broke, the bear retreated into the undergrowth. But they knew it was still out there, waiting. Dawn broke. Jake and Mia clung to the tree, exhausted and terrified. "We need to move," Jake whispered, wincing from his injuries. As they descended, a roar shattered the silence. The bear charged from the undergrowth. Mia screamed, "Run!" They stumbled through the forest, Jake leaving a blood trail. The bear pursued relentlessly. Mia spotted a clearing ahead. There, they burst into the open space, but found themselves trapped. Steep rocks blocked their path. The bear entered the clearing, growling menacingly. It circled them, eyes fixed on Jake's bloody form. "Mia," Jake gasped. "The spray. Did you grab it?" She fumbled in her pocket, producing the canister. "Got it." The bear lunged. Mia aimed and sprayed. The bear recoiled, shaking its head violently. "It worked," Mia exclaimed, but their relief was short-lived. The bear, enraged, charged again. Jake pushed Mia aside, taking the brunt of the attack. He screamed as claws raked his chest. Mia grabbed a branch, swinging desperately at the bear. "Leave him alone." The bear turned, swatting her aside effortlessly. She hit the ground hard, dazed. Jake dragged himself towards her, leaving a crimson trail. The bear followed, relentless. Mia struggled to her feet, positioning herself between Jake and the bear. She raised the spray again, praying it would be enough. The standoff continued, tension mounting. The bear's growls echoed through the clearing as Mia and Jake waited, trapped and terrified. Jake lost consciousness, blood pooling beneath him. Mia, panicked, dragged his limp body towards the trees. The bear pursued, its hot breath on her neck. They reached a small clearing, trapped. Mia positioned herself protectively over Jake, heart pounding. The bear circled, growling menacingly. Mia fumbled for the bear spray, hands shaking. "Stay back," she yelled, voice cracking. The bear charged. Mia sprayed, creating a stinging cloud. The bear recoiled, snorting and shaking its head. Mia used the moment to check Jake's pulse. Weak, but present. She tore strips from her shirt, frantically binding his wounds. "Hold on, Jake," she whispered. "Please hold on." The bear recovered, circling again. Mia stood, spray ready, determination in her eyes. A distant shout echoed. Hope surged through Mia. "Here! We're here!" she screamed. The bear, startled by the noise, retreated into the forest. Mia collapsed beside Jake, exhausted and relieved, as rescue approached. The distant shout grew closer, piercing through the dense forest. Mia's heart raced with a mixture of hope and fear as she cradled Jake's unconscious form. "Help! We're over here!" she screamed, her voice hoarse from hours of terror. Flashlight beams cut through the early morning mist. 2 park rangers emerged from the tree line, their faces etched with concern as they took in the gruesome scene. "Oh my God!" The first ranger, a woman with short gray hair, gasped. She spoke into her radio. "This is Ranger Thompson. We've located the victims. We need immediate medical evacuation." Azer, the second ranger, a younger man, approached cautiously, his eyes scanning the surrounding forest. "Ma'am, are you injured? Where's the bear now?" Mia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm okay, but Jake, he's hurt bad. The bear. It left when it heard you coming." Ranger Thompson knelt beside Jake, quickly assessing his injuries. "Multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding. We need to move fast." The younger ranger kept watch, his hand on his tranquilizer gun. "Nam, I'm Ranger Davis. Can you tell us what happened?" Mia recounted the night's events in a shaky voice, guilt washing over her as she described Jake's forgotten snacks. "You did everything you could," Ranger Davis reassured her. "Let's focus on getting you both to safety." A low whump-whump sound filled the air. Ranger Thompson looked up, relief evident on her face. "Chopper's here. We're going to move him now." As if on cue, the bear's roar echoed through the trees. Ranger Davis spun around, raising his gun. "It's coming back. We need to move. Now." With practiced efficiency, the Rangers secured Jake to a portable stretcher. Mia stumbled alongside them as they made their way to a small clearing where the helicopter was touching down. The bear crashed through the underbrush, charging towards them. Ranger Davis fired his tranquilizer gun, the dart finding its mark in the bear's shoulder. The massive animal slowed, stumbling, before retreating into the forest. "Go, go, go!" Ranger Thompson yelled as they reached the helicopter. The chopper's rotors whipped the air into a frenzy as they loaded Jake inside. Mia climbed in, her eyes never leaving Jake's pale face. A medic immediately began working on him, attaching IVs and monitoring equipment. As the helicopter lifted off, Mia caught a final glimpse of the bear, now a small dark shape disappearing into the vastness of the forest. She shuddered, turning her attention back to Jake. "Stay with me, Jake," she pleaded, gripping his hand. "We're safe now. You're going to be okay." The medic worked feverishly, calling out Jake's vitals to the pilot who relayed them to the hospital. Mia felt numb, the events of the past few hours seeming like a surreal nightmare. "Nam," the medic said gently. "We're doing everything we can. Can you tell me if he has any allergies or medical conditions we should know about?" Mia shook her head, realizing how little she knew about Jake's medical history. They had been friends for years, yet in this crucial moment, she felt helpless. The flight to the hospital seemed to take an eternity. As they touched down on the helipad, a team of doctors and nurses rushed forward, whisking Jake away in a flurry of medical jargon. Mia tried to follow but was gently held back by a nurse. "Let them work, honey. We need to get you checked out too." In a daze, Mia allowed herself to be led into the emergency room. As a doctor examined her for injuries, the adrenaline that had kept her going for hours finally wore off. She began to shake uncontrollably, tears flowing freely. "It's okay," the doctor soothed, wrapping a warm blanket around her shoulders. "You're safe now. You're incredibly brave, you know that?" Mia nodded numbly, her mind replaying the attack in vivid detail. "Will Jake be okay?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The doctor's face softened with compassion. "He's in the best possible hands now. We're doing everything we can." As Mia was treated for minor cuts and bruises, she heard a commotion in the hallway. Ranger Thompson entered the room, her face grim. "Miss Tran," she said softly, "I need to ask you some questions about the attack. I know this is difficult, but it's important for our investigation." Mia nodded, steeling herself. As she recounted the events once more, each detail seemed to carve itself deeper into her memory. The sound of Jake's scream, the bear's hot breath, the feeling of utter helplessness, all of it burned into her consciousness. As she finished her account, Ranger Thompson placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did everything right, Mia. You saved your friend's life." Mia looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and lingering fear. "What will happen to the bear?" Ranger Thompson sighed. "We'll try to locate and relocate it, but if it continues to show aggressive behavior, we may have no choice but to euthanize it." The weight of everything crashed down on Mia. The beautiful wilderness she had so eagerly looked forward to exploring now seemed like a distant, dangerous world. As she sat in the sterile hospital room, the beeping of machines a stark contrast to the natural sounds of the forest, Mia wondered if she would ever feel safe in the wilderness again. A doctor entered the room, his face serious. "Miss Tran, your friend is out of surgery. He's in critical condition but stable. Would you like to see him? Mia nodded, rising on shaky legs. As she followed the doctor to the ICU, she silently vowed to never take safety for granted again. The wilderness, she realized, was as unforgiving as it was beautiful, and the line between life and death was thinner than she had ever imagined. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment filled the sterile ICU room. Jake lay motionless, a maze of tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. Mia sat beside him, her eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion and tears. A soft knock on the door broke the monotony. Dr. Erica Chen, the lead surgeon, entered with a clipboard in hand. "Miss Tran," she said gently, "I'd like to update you on Jake's condition." Mia straightened, her heart racing. "Is he going to be okay?" Dr. Chen pulled up a chair. Jake's injuries were severe. He suffered deep lacerations to his chest and leg, significant blood loss, and internal injuries. "We've managed to stabilize him, but he's not out of the woods yet." Mia's breath hitched. "What does that mean?" "The next 48 hours are critical," Dr. Chen explained. "We're monitoring him closely for signs of infection or complications. He'll need multiple surgeries to repair the damage." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes. "This is all my fault. I should have made sure he secured the food properly." Dr. Chen placed a comforting hand on Mia's arm. "You can't blame yourself. Your quick thinking saved his life." A commotion in the hallway interrupted their conversation. Mia recognized the voices of Jake's parents. "Where is he? Where's our son?" Jake's mother's frantic voice carried into the room. Dr. Chen excused herself to speak with them. Mia could hear the muffled explanation, followed by Mrs. Olson's choked sob. Moments later, the Olsons burst into the room. Mrs. Olson rushed to Jake's bedside, while Mr. Olson's face was a mask of shock and anger. "What happened?" he demanded, his eyes boring into Mia. Mia recounted the events of that terrible night, her voice trembling. As she finished, Mrs. Olson enveloped her in a tight hug. "Thank you for saving our boy," she whispered. Mr. Olson's anger seemed to deflate. He sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. "I always worried about him in the wilderness. He could be so careless sometimes." A park ranger appeared in the doorway, clearing his throat. "Excuse me, I'm Ranger Mike Thompson. I need to ask Miss Tran some questions about the incident." Mia nodded, following the ranger to a small waiting area. As they sat, Ranger Thompson pulled out a notepad. "I know this is difficult, but I need you to walk me through everything that happened, in as much detail as you can remember," he said gently. Mia took a deep breath and began recounting the events once more. She described the campsite, the bear safety briefing they'd received, and Jake's forgotten snacks. Her voice faltered as she recalled the terrifying moments of the attack. Ranger Thompson listened intently, jotting down notes. When Mia finished, he looked up with a sympathetic expression. "Thank you, Miss Tran. This information will be crucial for our report and for preventing future incidents." Mia hesitated, then asked, "What's going to happen to the bear?" Ranger Thompson sighed. "We've tracked it to a location about 5 miles from your campsite. Given its aggressive behavior, we may have no choice but to euthanize it." Mia felt a pang of sadness. But it was just being a bear, wasn't it? We were the ones who made the mistake. "You're right," Ranger Thompson nodded. "Bears are wild animals acting on instinct. But once they associate humans with food, they become a danger to other campers. It's a difficult decision, but public safety has to come first." As Ranger Thompson left, Mia noticed a small crowd gathering near the nurse's station. A reporter was interviewing one of the doctors who had treated Jake. "One of the worst bear attacks we've seen in years," the doctor was saying. "It's a miracle the young man survived." Mia felt a surge of anger. Jake's trauma shouldn't be a spectacle for the evening news. She approached the reporter, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Excuse me, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't sensationalize what happened to my friend. This isn't about ratings. It's about a life that was nearly lost because of a simple mistake." The reporter turned, surprised. "Are you the young woman who saved him? Would you be willing to give us an interview?" Mia shook her head firmly. "No. Please, just let us heal in peace." As she turned away, she nearly collided with Dr. Chun. "Mia," the doctor said urgently, "Jake's showing signs of infection. We need to take him back into surgery." Mia's world seemed to tilt. She watched helplessly as a team of medical professionals rushed Jake's bed down the hallway towards the operating room. Mrs. Olson gripped Mia's hand, her face pale with worry. "He'll pull through this. He has to." Hours crawled by as they waited for news. Mia paced the waiting room, replaying every moment of their trip in her mind. If only she had double-checked the campsite. If only she had insisted on proper food storage. If only. Finally, Dr. Chun emerged, her surgical mask hanging around her neck. "We've managed to control the infection," she announced. "Jake's condition is still serious, but he's stable." A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Mr. Olson, who had been stoically silent, finally broke down, tears streaming down his face. As the tension eased, Mia felt the full weight of exhaustion settle over her. She excused herself and stepped outside the hospital for some fresh air. The world seemed surreal. People were going about their daily lives, oblivious to the life-altering drama unfolding inside the hospital. Cars honked. A group of children laughed as they passed by. A couple strolled hand in hand. Mia's phone buzzed with notifications. News of the bear attack had spread, and her social media was flooded with messages from concerned friends and curious strangers. She turned off her phone, unable to deal with the outside world just yet. As she leaned against the hospital wall, Mia spotted Ranger Thompson approaching. He had a grim expression on his face. "Miss Tran," he said, "I wanted to let you know personally. We've had to euthanize the bear." Mia felt a lump in her throat. "I understand," she managed to say. Ranger Thompson continued, "We'll be issuing a statement soon, emphasizing the importance of proper food storage in bear country. Your experience, well, it might help prevent future tragedies." Mia nodded, unable to speak. The ranger gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze before leaving. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the hospital parking lot, Mia steeled herself to return to Jake's bedside. The road to recovery would be long and difficult, but she was determined to be there every step of the way. The events of the past 24 hours had changed her forever. The wilderness, once a source of joy and adventure, now held a new, terrifying dimension. But as Mia walked back into the hospital, she realized that true courage wasn't about fearlessness in the face of danger, but about facing your fears and moving forward anyway. With a deep breath, she pushed open the door to Jake's room, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sterile smell of disinfectant permeated the air as Mia entered Jake's hospital room. It had been 3 weeks since the bear attack, and Jake had undergone multiple surgeries. He lay in bed, his body a patchwork of bandages and healing scars. "K there, survivor," Mia said softly, settling into the chair beside his bed. Jake's eyes fluttered open, a weak smile crossing his face. "Hey yourself, hero." Mia winced at the word. "How are you feeling today?" "Like I went 10 rounds with a grizzly," Jake chuckled, then grimaced in pain. "Oh man, laughing hurts." Dr. Chun entered the room, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, Jake. How's the pain today on a scale of 1 to 10? "About a 6, Jake replied, his face tightening as he shifted in bed. Dr. Chun nodded, making a note. "That's an improvement. We'll continue with your current pain management regimen." She turned to Mia. "It's good to see you here. Jake's been making remarkable progress. but he still has a long road ahead. As Dr. Chin left, Jake's parents entered the room. Mrs. Olson immediately went to Jake's side, fussing over his pillows. "Nom, I'm fine," Jake protested weakly. Mr. Olson cleared his throat. "Son, we've been talking with the doctors. They think you might be ready for transfer to a rehabilitation facility next week." Jake's face fell. "Rehabbed? For how long?" "It could be several weeks, maybe months," Mrs. Olson said gently. "You need intensive physical therapy to regain your strength and mobility." Jake closed his eyes, a look of despair crossing his face. Mia felt a pang of guilt, knowing that their ill-fated camping trip had led to this. "I'll visit you every day," Mia promised. "We'll get through this together." Later that afternoon, as Jake dozed, Mia stepped out into the hallway. She nearly collided with a man in a suit. "Excuse me?" he said. "Are you Mia Tran?" Mia nodded wearily. "I'm David Lowenstein, from the National Park Service." He introduced himself. "I was hoping to speak with you about the incident." Mia hesitated, then led him to a quiet corner of the waiting room. "What do you want to know?" Lowenstein pulled out a notepad. "We're conducting a thorough investigation into the attack. Your account is crucial for our report and future safety protocols." For the next hour, Mia recounted the events in painstaking detail. Lowenstein listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification. "Thank you, Miss Tran," he said as he finished his notes. "Your experience, though tragic, will help us improve our visitor safety measures." As Lowenstein left, Mia's phone buzzed. It was a text from her therapist, reminding her of their appointment the next day. Mia had been seeing Dr. Sarah Goldstein twice a week since the attack, struggling to process her trauma. The next morning, Mia sat in Dr. Goldstein's office, fidgeting with a stress ball. "How have you been sleeping, Mia?" Dr. Goldstein asked. Mia sighed. "Still having nightmares. I keep seeing the bear, hearing Jake's screams. I can't shake the feeling that I could have prevented it all." Dr. Goldstein leaned forward. "Mia, we've talked about this. You're not responsible for what happened. You saved Jake's life." I know," Mia said, frustrated. "But knowing it and feeling it are two different things." "That's true," Dr. Goldstein nodded. "Healing takes time. Have you been practicing the mindfulness exercises we discussed?" Mia nodded. "They help a little, but every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that forest." As the session continued, Mia worked through her feelings of guilt and fear. Dr. Goldstein gently guided her, helping her to reframe her thoughts and develop coping strategies. After her therapy session, Mia returned to the hospital. She found Jake sitting up in bed, a physical therapist guiding him through some gentle exercises. "Look at you up and at 'em," Mia said cheerfully. Jake grimaced as he completed a set of arm rotations. "Yeah, feeling like $1,000,000, he said sarcastically. The physical therapist, a young man named Alex, smiled encouragingly. "You're doing great, Jake. Remember, slow and steady wins the race." As Alex left, Jake slumped back against his pillows. "This sucks, Mia. I feel so helpless." Mia took his hand. "I know it's hard, but you're making progress every day. You're alive, Jake. That's what matters." Jake squeezed her hand. "Thanks to you. I don't think I've properly thanked you for saving my life." Mia felt tears welling up. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad you're okay." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of their shared experience hanging between them. Later that evening, as Mia was preparing to leave, a nurse entered with a tablet. "Jake, there's a news report about the bear attack. Would you like to see it?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. The nurse handed him the tablet and left. The report showed footage of the forest where the attack had occurred. A somber-faced reporter stood at the entrance to the trail. 3 weeks ago, this peaceful trail became the site of a vicious bear attack, the reporter said. Today, park officials announced new measures to improve camper safety, including mandatory bear safety classes for all overnight visitors. The screen switched to an interview with Ranger Thompson. This incident serves as a stark reminder of the importance of proper food storage in bear country, he said. We're implementing stricter enforcement of our bear-proof container policy. As the report ended, Jake handed the tablet back to Mia, his face unreadable. You okay? Mia asked softly. Jake nodded slowly. Yeah, I think so. That's just surreal, you know? Seeing it on the news like that, Mia understood all too well. Their personal trauma had become a public story, a cautionary tale for other campers. As visiting hours came to an end, Mia gathered her things to leave. At the door, she turned back to Jake. Hey, I almost forgot. I brought you something. She pulled a small stuffed bear from her bag. Jake raised an eyebrow. Seriously? Mia grinned. I thought it might help you face your fears. You know, exposure therapy and all that. Jake chuckled, then winced. Ow, don't make me laugh, Tran. As Mia left the hospital, she felt a glimmer of hope. The road to recovery would be long and challenging, but they were facing it together. The bear attack had changed them both, but it hadn't broken them. As she stepped into the cool evening air, Mia realized that healing, like the wilderness itself, was a journey of both beauty and struggle. 6 months had passed since the fateful night in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as Jake Olson slowly made his way up the steps to his apartment building. His gait was still uneven, favoring his right leg, a permanent reminder of the bear attack that had nearly claimed his life. As he reached for his keys, the door swung open. Mia Tran stood there, a tentative smile on her face. Surprise, she said softly. I thought you might need some help after your final PT session. Jake's face softened. Thanks, Mia. Come on in. The apartment was neat but sparse, evidence of Jake's long absence during his hospitalization and rehabilitation. Mia helped him to the couch, where he sank down with a grateful sigh. How'd it go today? Mia asked, settling into an armchair across from him. Jake ran a hand through his hair, longer now than he usually kept it. Dr. Patel says I've made excellent progress. I'm about as good as I'm going to get, physically speaking. Mia nodded, understanding the unspoken implication. Jake would always carry the scars, both physical and emotional, of that night. And mentally? She probed gently. Jake's eyes met hers, a mix of emotions swirling in their depths. It's the process. The nightmares aren't as frequent, but they're still intense when they come. Mia reached out, squeezing his hand. I know. Me too. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. The ticking of a clock on the wall seemed to echo the passing of time since their ordeal. I saw Dr. Goldstein yesterday, Mia said, breaking the silence. She thinks I'm ready to try something. Gant. Jake raised an eyebrow. Anne. Mia took a deep breath. She suggested it might be healing for me. For both of us, actually, to go back to the park. The color drained from Jake's face. Go back? Mia, I don't know if I can. I know it's scary, Mia said quickly. Terrifies me too. But Dr. Goldstein thinks facing our fears head-on might help us move past them. Jake stood abruptly, wincing as he put weight on his bad leg. He limped to the window, staring out at the city skyline. I haven't set foot in a forest since it happened. The very thought makes my heart race. Mia joined him at the window. Mine too, but maybe that's why we need to do it. To reclaim that part of ourselves that loved the outdoors. Jake turned to her, his expression a mixture of fear and longing. I miss it, Mia. I miss the fresh air, the sound of leaves rustling, the feeling of being connected to nature. But every time I think about going back, the bear, Mia finished for him. Jake nodded, swallowing hard. How do we know it won't happen again? Mia pulled out her phone, bringing up a web page. I've been doing research. Look at these statistics. Bear attacks are incredibly rare. What happened to us was a freak occurrence, exacerbated by... She trailed off, not wanting to assign blame. By my carelessness, Jake finished, his voice heavy with regret. Hey, Mia said firmly. We've been over this. It was a mistake, yes, but you've paid for it 1,000 times over. We both have. Jake sighed, moving back to the couch. Mia followed, sitting beside him this time. Tell me more about this idea, Jake said finally. Mia's face lit up. Well, I was thinking we could start small. There's a nature preserve just outside the city. It's well-maintained. Lots of people around. No bears. We could try a short walk there. See how it feels. Jake considered this, his brow furrowed in thought. And if that goes okay, then maybe we work our way up. Longer hikes, more remote areas. And eventually, she hesitated. Maybe we go back to Great Smoky Mountains. Face our fears where they began. Jake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm scared, Mia. Not just of bears, but of feeling that helpless again. Mia took his hand in both of hers. I know, I'm scared too, but we're stronger now, Jake. We survived something terrible and we're still here. Maybe it's time we start living again, not just surviving. Jake looked at her, a glimmer of his old adventurous spirit sparking in his eyes. Okay, he said finally. Let's try the nature preserve. Baby steps, right? Mia beamed. Baby steps. 2 weeks later, Jake and Mia stood at the entrance to Willow Creek Nature Preserve. The autumn sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the leaf-strewn path before them. Jake took a deep breath, his hands clenched at his sides. It smells like the forest. Mia nodded, her own anxiety evident in the tightness of her shoulders. Yeah, it does. You okay? Jake gave a short nod. Let's do this. They set off down the path, their steps slow and deliberate. At first, every snapping twig or rustling bush made them jump. But as they walked, the familiar rhythms of the forest began to work their magic. Knock, Mia said softly, pointing to a patch of late-blooming wildflowers. Aren't they beautiful? Jake smiled, his first genuine smile since they'd arrived. Yeah, they are. As they continued their walk, they encountered other hikers, families with children, elderly couples. The normalcy of it all began to ease their tension. They reached a small clearing with benches overlooking a babbling brook. Jake sank onto one, massaging his leg. Need a break? Mia asked, concern in her voice. Jake nodded. Just for a minute. There's not pain exactly. More like remembering. Mia sat beside him, their shoulders touching. Want to talk about it? Jake was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow over smooth stones. I keep thinking about that night, how beautiful it was before everything went wrong. I loved being out there, Mia. I don't want to lose that. Mia leaned her head on his shoulder. What? We're here, aren't we? It's a start. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the brook and the chirping of birds. After a while, Jake stood, offering his hand to Mia. Ready to head back? Mia took his hand, rising. Actually, I packed a little picnic. Think you're up for finding a nice spot to eat? Jake hesitated only briefly before nodding. Yeah, I think I am. They found a sunny patch of grass near the brook. As they spread out the blanket Mia had brought, a squirrel darted past, chattering indignantly. Jake chuckled. Guess we're intruding on his turf. Mia grinned, pulling sandwiches and fruit from her backpack. Here, she said, handing Jake a sandwich. I made sure everything's sealed in airtight containers. No bears are getting our lunch this time. Jake froze for a moment, then burst out laughing. Too soon, Tran. Too soon. As they ate, the tension that had gripped them since entering the preserve began to dissipate. They talked about mundane things: work, friends, a new movie they wanted to see. For a little while, it was almost like old times. As they packed up their picnic, Jake turned to Mia, his expression serious. "Thank you for this. For pushing me to come here. I didn't realize how much I needed it." Mia smiled, her eyes shining. "Me too. It feels good to be out here again. Doesn't it?" Jake nodded, taking in the forest around them. "Yeah, it really does." Over the next few months, Jake and Mia made regular trips to Willow Creek. Each visit became easier, their enjoyment of nature gradually overshadowing their fear. They progressed to longer hikes, even venturing to a nearby state park for a weekend camping trip. It was during this trip, as they sat around a carefully maintained campfire, that Jake broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. "I think I'm ready," he said quietly. Mia looked up from the marshmallow she was roasting. "Ready for what?" Jake took a deep breath. "To go back. To Great Smoky Mountains." Mia's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "There's no rush, Jake. We can take as much time as you need." Jake nodded, his expression resolute. "I'm sure. I need to do this, Mia. We need to do this." 2 weeks later, they stood at the entrance to the same trail where their nightmare had begun a year ago. The forest looked different in the winter light, the trees bare, a light dusting of snow on the ground. Ranger Thompson met them at the trailhead, his face solemn. "I'm glad you decided to come back," he said. "Many people never do after an experience like yours." Jake shook the ranger's hand. "We almost didn't, but we realized we had to face our fears to truly move on." Ranger Thompson nodded approvingly. "That takes courage. Now, I'll be accompanying you to your old campsite. We've made some changes I want to show you." As they hiked, Ranger Thompson pointed out new signage about bear safety, improved food storage lockers at campsites, and emergency communication stations along the trail. "Your experience, tragic as it was, helped us implement these changes," the ranger explained. "You've probably saved lives without knowing it." When they reached their old campsite, Jake and Mia stood silent for a long moment. The place looked so ordinary, so peaceful. It was hard to reconcile it with their memories of terror and pain. "This is where it happened," Jake said softly. "Brulk." Mia felt her own eyes welling up. "You don't have to thank me, Jake. You would have done the same for me. We saved each other." They embraced, the emotions of the past year flowing between them. When they separated, both felt a sense of release, as if a weight had been lifted. "So," Mia said, wiping her eyes, "what do you think? Should we set up camp?" Jake looked around the site, then back at Mia. A slow smile spread across his face. "Yeah," he said, "let's do it." As they set up their tent and organized their gear, meticulously following all bear safety protocols, Jake and Mia felt a shift within themselves. The forest, once a source of terror and trauma, was becoming a place of healing and renewal. That night, as they sat by their campfire, the stars twinkling overhead, Jake raised his mug of hot chocolate in a toast. "To facing our fears," he said. Mia clinked her mug against his. "To reclaiming our love for the wilderness." They fell into a comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the forest. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond their fire's glow. A year ago, this would have sent them into a panic. Now they exchanged glances, tense but composed. "Probably just a raccoon," Mia said with a small smile, echoing Jake's words from that fateful night. Jake nodded, relaxing. "Probably, but maybe we should turn in for the night, pack up the food properly." As they secured their supplies in the bear locker, Jake paused, looking out into the dark forest. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I used to think courage meant not being afraid. Now I know it's about facing your fears and moving forward anyway." Mia stood beside him, following his gaze. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Jake put his arm around her shoulders. We have, and we've got a long way yet to go, but I'm glad we're on this journey together. As they retired to their tent, the forest settled around them. The wind whispered through the bare branches, carrying with it the promise of spring, of new beginnings. Jake and Mia drifted off to sleep, their dreams no longer haunted by the bear, but filled with the beauty and wonder of the wilderness they had rediscovered. In the morning, they would wake to a world transformed by their newfound perspective. The path ahead would not always be easy, but they faced it with renewed strength and courage. Their scars, both physical and emotional, would remain, but they were no longer wounds. They had become badges of survival, testaments to their resilience. As dawn broke over the Great Smoky Mountains, Jake and Mia's healing journey continued, one step at a time, into the heart of the wilderness they had learned to love again.